I grew up in Oxford in the 1970s, yet when I circled around the roundabout next to where I lived, I passed some of the poorest and the richest people in the city, which might explain why I'm a geographer who specialises in inequality.
50 years ago, Britain was the second most equal large country in Western Europe. Now it is the second most unequal country in the whole of Europe, with the highest food bank use, the highest university fees, the least affordable housing, and a life expectancy that has been falling since 2014.
The welfare state provided equitable health, education and housing opportunities. It was developed during the Second World War in an attempt to slay what Beveridge, the master of University College, Oxford, called the five evils: want, squalor, idleness, ignorance and disease.
The austerity measures of 1950s Britain combined with the newly formed welfare state to bring increasing equality, which peaked in the early 70s before permanently crashing during the Thatcher years. The Conservative Party's 21st century austerity measures have led to the highest poverty levels in Britain since the 1930s.
These evils have now transformed into hunger, waste, precarity, exploitation and fear.
Despite huge amounts of waste from households and restaurants, millions of British people now rely on food banks and charity. There are reports of babies in Oxford who have never had a warm bath.
A couple of years after you hear each anecdote, the statistics confirm the shocking reality, but it is possible to control food prices, and this is done regularly in much of mainland Europe, like when Greece capped the price of coffee and a cheese toastie many years ago. Even in one of our own countries, children in 2023 were lifted out of poverty by the Scottish Child Poverty Payment, providing an extra £25 a week for each poorer child up to age 16.
The privatisation of social housing, revocation of rental regulations, and hoarding of housing by the rich have led to record levels of households facing homelessness in the UK.
No one can afford ever rising housing costs, and to prevent people from being exploited, rent regulation and decent tenancy rights exist in other European countries. Utility prices are better regulated and increasingly subsidised, with several countries demonstrating that basic services, those which everyone needs, can be made cheap and even free at the point of use.
In England, there has been no levelling up since the levelling up policy was announced. Many people across the country are trapped in what is often unproductive work.
Every single large European country has considerably higher public spending than the UK, and because of this, their households have a higher median income, and all their workers have more free time than those in the UK.
England has the highest university fees in the world. Average UK undergraduate fees are a third higher than the next most expensive country, the United States. We have created enormous debts for students, many unlikely to earn more than they would without going to university.
In almost all of the rest of Europe, university education is a public good, to which you are entitled and for which you pay very little or nothing at all. What's more, no other affluent country in the world spends as much money per head on private education as the UK does, except possibly Chile.
In 1950, life expectancy in Britain was the 6th best in the world. By 2021, it had fallen to 37th, a direct result of austerity.
We are fooled again and again into thinking that we'll one day be okay, that the sunlit uplands lie just over the brow of the next mountain of pain. Our leaders persist in painting over the cracks of a shattered nation. But if we look back more carefully than they do, we can see the DNA of our own more equal, kinder and more progressive past. And we can see it in the actions now being taken on the edges of Britain. And we can see it across all of Europe today by looking at the policies of nations that are past achievements, often partly inspired. This book not only looks at the statistical evidence of a country in decline, but it shows how and why it is time to start picking up the pieces of our shattered nation.